Hey everyone, welcome back to part two of the necklace. Let's go ahead and see what happens when Madame arrives at the ball with her beautiful diamond necklace loaned to her from a friend because she absolutely could not go to the ball without being adorned in some sort of jewels that would place her not in the middle lower class that she feels she belongs to, but in the higher class that she aspires to. Okay. So, a couple literary elements that we're going to be going over today. Number one, point of view. What is the perspective of the narrator? And how does this shape the way the characters are portrayed? How does it shape the theme? How does it shape our understanding of the plot? And encompassed in that is tone. The tone is created when the author figure out a certain point of view that they want to infuse throughout the story, and tone helps them to achieve that point of view. Then, of course, since the whole story uh, for many short stories lies in that ending, that twist, that irony, that shock, we're of course just going to touch upon why did it end the way that it did? How does that enhance the structure of the story? And how does it relate to the larger themes? Let's get started. Point of view is the literary element we're going to be going over most today. Every short story, every book that you read has a point of view that's just waiting to be analyzed. And what we want to think about from point of view is what is the narrator's attitude toward the subject? Of course, you have first person point of view, second person point of view, third person point of view. We are in third person point of view in this story. The narrator seems to be an omniscient one, meaning that it knows everything that's going on inside of the minds of the characters. But with the third person, even if it's omniscient, they still have their own attitude toward their subject. They can judge their subjects, they can praise their subjects, they can make fun of them, they can paint them as heroes. So the narrator is not some objective God looking down. It's someone who is portraying the characters in a very particular way that reveals the author's intentions behind the story and behind the themes. Remember, if our theme we're thinking about is class, an idea that you understand which class you belong to, and you aspire to get to a higher class, or you identify with those people in your class consciousness, we want to think about, well, how does the narrator's attitude toward Matilda, toward Matilda's husband, towards the whole um, nature of Matilda's attitude toward life, how does the narrator portray that attitude? So there's two kind of big buckets that we can think about for the narrator's attitude, both in this but also in any story. On the one hand, a narrator can be very critical of its characters. When I say toward the subject I just mean is the things that the narrator is talking about. That is Matilda. That is her desire to be somebody else. That is her bitterness at her station in life. It's her feeling like her husband and her daily activities don't fit what she believes she should be doing. I believe that it's quite critical. The narrator's critical of Matilda, right? He thinks that she is someone who not is not very virtuous. She's not a hero. She's silly. He paints her as a silly person. So he's very critical. Now, on the other hand, a narrator can paint their subject as with admiration. Is the narrator admiring of its character or is it critical of its character? Well, I would actually argue that in some case, in very, very slightly, there is some admiration, perhaps at the end. However, right now, at the beginning, it's mostly critical. And whenever the narrator wants to evoke this criticism, he uses sarcasm. And we're going to go take a look at how he does that. Because the story is actually funny. I mean, it's kind of sad, but that's what sarcasm does. It creates both humor and tragedy at the same time. And I think this story is both. Whenever he uses admiration, he doesn't use sarcasm. That makes sense, right? When you want to criticize something and make fun of it, you use sarcasm. When you want to show that you think something deserves your respect, you don't use sarcasm. So we're going to go and practice and see how this is working throughout the story. But what I want to ask you, a question I want you to keep in mind, is the narrator making fun of Matilda in order to prove his point about our obsession with class status? When I say make fun, I mean, does he treat her desire to be of a higher class with sarcasm, like as if she's silly and all the things that she's talking about is very trivial? Or does he ever show empathy for her suffering? He says that she suffers, but he's making fun of it as if aspiring to a higher class is not something you should suffer about, right? Just because you want jewels and you want clothes. I mean, is that real suffering? Is real suffering not, poverty, going to war? So is Matilda really suffering, or is he just making fun of her? And does he ever show, as the story progresses, her empathy for her? This is what we want to think about with point of view. These are the kinds of questions you want to ask whenever you read a short story. So we have an activity that we're going to do. Let's go take a look at how we're going to identify some of this sarcasm and some of this admiration. So you guys have to do the work first before I'm going to share with you my perspective on the whole matter. So here's what we're going to do. You guys are going to be exercising finding quotes that reveal point of view and tone. You have two columns here, and you have to find three quotes that help us see the narrator's point of view and tone, um, his attitude towards Matilda or towards Matilda's husband. So in one column, you're going to find three quotes that show he's very critical of Matilda. Either he mocks her, he uses sarcasm. It might seem like he's admiring her, like, oh, her heart was beating when she found the jewels. But it's all ironic because he wants to show how silly she is and how her suffering isn't real suffering and how she doesn't really know like virtue and the value of things. Right? She's almost like a child. That's what you want to find for this column. In this column, I'm going to ask you, does he ever show that he admires Matilda or Matilda's husband? And what I mean by that is, does he ever treat them not with sarcasm, but he actually sees that something that they're doing deserves empathy? This might come a little bit later in the story, hint, hint, okay, when things fall apart for them. So you're going to you're going to copy and paste three quotes for each of these. Remember, the necklace story is on the Google Classroom for you. And when you're done, you're going to press turn it in, and we'll go over some of these quotes together after 10 minutes. Were you able to find three quotes for each? Maybe, maybe not. I wanted to argue my three quotes for each and to see how the character is displaying these different types of tone and point of view. So I think that he displays mockery and sarcasm in three examples. Number one, let's read it. She suffered intensely, this is in the beginning, feeling herself born for every delicacy and every luxury. She suffered from the poverty of her dwelling, from the worn walls, the abraded chairs, the ugliness of the stuffs. But what we know is that she might just be exaggerating just how poor she is. We know what poverty really means. At the end of the story, she actually goes into poverty. So really, was it poverty that she was in? She felt like she was in poverty. So I think he's really making fun of her here. Okay, now it seems like she's suffering, seems like it's heroism, but he's using irony to show that he thinks she is ridiculous for believing that and not accepting her reality. What's the point of not accepting your reality? I mean, in our time, it's much easier as a woman to find your own way in the world and to rise up. If you want something, you can go get it. You know, this is not the case for the 19th century woman. I don't know if the author, cares about her, suffering on the inside. I think he really just sees her as someone who's not able to accept the things that she should accept in life. It's ridiculous to go against it. And when she does try to go against reality, she actually ends up even further down suffering. Okay, here's another example. All at once, she discovered in a box of black satin a superb necklace of diamonds, and her heart began to beat with boundless desire. Her hands trembled in taking it up. She fastened it around her throat on her high dress and remained in ecstasy before herself. Well, this is the kind of um, description you would use if somebody maybe had some real true emotion or feeling in response to something important. But diamonds and necklaces and stuff for the narrator is not important. It's ridiculous to have your heart beat with this when her heart doesn't beat for her husband, it doesn't beat for having children, doing, you know, um, learning things about the world, none of that. Having friends, she doesn't care. She just wants her diamonds. So that's how it's mockery. Although it seems like admiration, right? It seems like a bit of heroism, but it's not. It's mockery and sarcasm. Number three, she danced with delight, with passion, intoxicated with pleasure, thinking of nothing. In the triumph of her beauty, right? This is when she's actually at the ball. In the glory of her success, in a sort of cloud of happiness made up of all these tributes, of all the admirations, of all these awakened desires, of this victory so complete and so sweet to a woman's heart. All sarcasm, right? Is she really victorious? No. She is vain. Vain means all she cares about is herself and how she looks. She doesn't care about creating real relationships with people. She doesn't care about anything that's going to happen after this. It's just this moment where she wants to be somebody else. So, although it seems like there's a lot of diction means word choice, of triumph, victory, it's all an illusion. It's all a false illusion. And what the narrator is trying to do is to disillusion us, the readers, by using this sarcasm because it's going to turn out not to be a victory for her. And this is how he shows his moral stance. He does not believe that she is moral because she is not approaching her life in the right way. And so what can she do? Well, the narrator decides to be a little evil to her and forces her, of course, into a life of poverty. But that's when I think he starts to show empathy for her and for her husband. Here's one example. This is what her husband had to do. He compromised the end of his life, risked his signature, right, because he was going to take a loan out to get the jewels, without even knowing whether it could be honored, and frightened by all the anguish of the future. by the black misery which was about to settle down on him, by the perspective of all sorts of physical deprivations, right? He's going to be deprived of things, of all sorts of moral tortures. He went to buy the new diamond necklace, laying down on the jeweler's counter 36,000 francs. I don't know what that translates to in modern money, but a lot because their whole life they become in poverty because they had to buy this new diamond necklace to replace the old one that Matilda lost on the night of her ball. But do you see the difference in tone here? Everything here is about triumph, right? But it's in victory, but this is all an illusion. Finally, he uses true empathy and he's not using sarcasm when he's actually talking about the misery that they have to go through. And this is when the narrator starts to feel empathy for the two characters. And he actually calls her a hero at some point. She made the best of it, moreover, frankly, heroically. The frightful debt must be paid. She would pay it. So you see, she's starting to lose her illusions. She's starting to come to reality. She knows she's going to have to work for the rest of her life to pay off this debt, and she becomes humbled. And for him, that presents a heroism, that presents the moral of the story. And then she even has a deeper thought. But sometimes when her husband was at the office, she sat down by the window and she thought of that evening long ago, of that ball where she had been so beautiful and so admired. What would have happened if she had not lost that necklace? Who knows? Who knows? How singular life is, how changeable, what a little thing it takes to save you or to lose you. I actually think that that's true empathy that the narrator is feeling, and he's imagining himself in Matilda's shoes and even though he had made fun of her for so long, he now does realize the kind of more depth and complexity of the pain of Matilda's life and how it unfolded. So isn't this a cool way to unpack point of view and to see how the narrator and the author think about the characters and how that helps the meaning of the story? Now, I want to think just about the ending quickly before we go. Why not have Matilda respond after Madame Forrester? Let's go take a look at this end exchange at the store in the end of the story. So she meets Madame Forrester in the park or something and says, "You remember that diamond necklace that you lent me to go to the ball at the ministry?" "Yes, and then?" "Well, I lost it." "How can that be, since you brought it back to me?" "I brought you back another just like it, and now for 10 years we have been paying for it. You'll understand that it was not easy for us who had nothing. At least it is done, and I am mighty glad." Madame Forrester had guessed. "You say that you bought a diamond necklace to replace mine?" "Yes, you did not notice it even, did you? They were exactly alike." And she smiled with proud, naive joy. Madame Forrester, much moved, took her by both hands. "Oh, my poor Matilda! But mine were false. At most they were worth 500 francs." And then nothing else. What should be here in all of this silence? This, I think, is the, you know, tragedy, the kind of quiet tragedy of the story. And I think the biggest impact of the story is in the part that isn't even said. Matilda's reaction and meditation on the way her life turned out, all because of this false diamond necklace that she paid back, spent her whole life working. She aged considerably where Madame Forrester hadn't aged at all because hard work will do that to you. And in this silence, I think the narrator and the point of view really reaches its climax. And there's a kind of silent tragedy here at the end where we feel for Matilda. Even though the rest of the story was all sarcasm, mockery, I think he allows us to have some sort of sympathy for her here. So you see the way the story ends, this structure of not having Matilda respond, and the structure of leaving the twist till the very last line of the story has a wonderful effect on the tragic heroism of the story, the ironic tragic heroism of the story. So I have a question for you for homework. Is the narrator too harsh on Matilda, or does she deserve her fate? Could you imagine a whole different short story in which the narrator were actually sympathetic to Matilda's hatred of her life and her anxiety about aspiring to something more? What if he painted her as if, we all go through this and this is a relatable thing and we need to talk about this more? What if he had more sympathy? How would this change the story's meaning about how we should look at our own perspective of our class and our belonging to that class? Or does he just think Matilda is just too materialistic? She just only cared about clothes and she deserved her fate. What do you think? Do you think that he is sympathetic in this story? Is he too harsh? Does she deserve her fate? Do you feel like he does have some sympathy for her? All of these are wrapped up in the question for homework this week. And we're moving on too. We're going to read A Rose for Emily. And of course, on the Google Classroom, you have week 28 homework. Is the narrator too harsh? You're going to be writing a paragraph, and all the directions are there for you. So please enjoy, and I will see you guys next week. After you read A Rose for Emily, we will analyze the first half, and on the second week, we'll analyze the second half. Happy reading!